fascinating and I'd say potentially alarming. It's
Yeah.
mirror life. We're going to be looking at some pretty dense scientific papers and reports.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's a really interesting topic. So hopefully it'll be more interesting than just reading those on your own.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be pretty interesting.
Okay, so imagine a world where organisms are built with molecules that are like flipped,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like a mirror image of the ones that we're familiar with.
Perhaps.
So instead of the usual left-handed amino acids that you find in proteins, these organisms would use right-handed ones.
Yeah.
It's kind of like having a whole second set of Legos.
Yeah.
But they don't quite fit with the ones we already have.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I like that. And the reason that this matters is because all life on Earth, as we know it, it's built with this specific handedness. It's called homochirality.
Yeah.
But what if there's another way? What if there's somewhere out there, or even here on Earth, there's life that's built with this opposite chirality? That's kind of the mind-bending question behind mirror life.
Right, and this isn't just some like sci-fi thought experiment anymore. There's a group of 38 leading scientists, including Nobel laureates, who have issued a pretty stark warning about the risks of creating mirror bacteria. They're calling for a halt to research that's aimed at actually creating these mirror organisms. So what's got these experts so worried?
Well, one major concern that they have is that our defenses against disease wouldn't work on mirror life.
I mean, like our immune systems.
Exactly. So imagine like a mirror bacterium invading your body. Your immune system wouldn't be able to recognize it as a threat because all of its molecules are backwards, right? So it's like trying to fit a left-handed glove on your right hand. It's just, it's not going to work.
So our bodies wouldn't even know how to fight off these mirror organisms.
Yeah, potentially not.
That's kind of freaky.
Yeah, and it gets even it's not just our immune systems, like antibiotics wouldn't work on these organisms either because antibiotics target specific structures in bacteria. And those structures would be they'd be flipped or mirrored in a mirror organism.
Okay, so no antibiotics, no immune response. What else are these scientists worried about?
Well, think about it this way. Life on Earth has evolved over billions of years, right, to coexist in this very delicate balance.
Right.
And if we were to introduce a mirror organism, there's no telling how it could disrupt that balance. It's completely unpredictable.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. But on the flip side, some scientists are exploring these mirror image molecules for things like longer lasting medications, right?
Right.
So could this mirror technology actually have some benefits?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the most intriguing aspects of this whole field, right? Like, imagine if you had drugs that lasted longer in the body because our enzymes couldn't recognize them. That could be revolutionary, especially for treating things like chronic diseases.
Yeah, I get it. It's like having a secret weapon against diseases, but
Yeah.
uncreating a whole mirror bacterium be kind of like, opening Pandora's box?
Yeah, that's a concern that a lot of scientists are raising. And Dr. Michael Kay, who's a leading expert in mirror image pharmaceuticals, he argues that even if we could create mirror bacteria in a controlled lab environment,
Yeah.
there's always the risk of accidental release, right? You can't completely eliminate that possibility.
Okay, so I'm starting to see why this is such a big deal, right? It's not just about the science. It's about the potential consequences. Right. I mean, if this stuff gets out, there's no knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And Dr. K, offered a pretty chilling example in one of the articles you shared, which was mirror cyanobacteria.
Right.
These are microbes that thrive on sunlight and basic nutrients, just like the regular ones that we have, right? But if a mirror version were to escape, it's possible that it could outcompete its natural counterparts and disrupt the entire food chain from the bottom up.
Wow. Starting at the bottom and just messing up the whole system. But hasn't there been some pushback against this moratorium? Don't some scientists think that we can control this technology?
Yeah, there are definitely some scientists who believe that we can we can harness the potential of mirror technology while also mitigating the risks.
Right.
And Professor Paul Fremont, for example, he thinks that with proper safeguards, we could explore the benefits of mirror molecules without actually creating self-replicating organisms, right?
Yeah.
He's more focused on things like those those long-lasting drugs that we were talking about.
Okay, so it's not like a black and white issue. There are valid points on both sides, but how close are we really to creating mirror life? Is this something that we need to be panicking about right now?
Well, no one has created a mirror organism yet. But in the past few decades, we've seen some some pretty major leaps in synthetic biology. Scientists have already created synthetic viruses, partially synthetic bacteria, and even synthetic ribosomes.
Hold on. Synthetic ribosomes. Those are the things that make proteins, right?
Yeah, exactly. And creating those from scratch was a huge milestone, right? It
Yeah.
shows just how rapidly this field is progressing.
Yeah.
And that's why I think this whole discussion about mirror life is so timely.
Yeah.
We need to be having these discussions about the ethics and the safety
Right.
before we get to the point where we're, actually creating a self-replicating mirror organism.
So we've got this like incredible potential to create mirror life, maybe even a whole second tree of life, like some
Mhm.
scientists are suggesting, but also this looming threat of uncontrollable consequences.
Yeah.
What was the real turning point that sparked this urgent call for moratorium?
Yeah, I think the publication of that report, the 299-page one, and that group
Nice.
of 38 scientists, that really seemed to shake things up. It laid out the potential risks in pretty stark detail.
Yeah.
And coming from such prominent figures, including, Nobel laureates, it really carried a lot of weight.
Yeah, it sounds like it wasn't just a casual concern. It was like a serious alarm bell being rung by some of the top minds in the field.
Yeah, for sure.
So what were they most worried about?
Well, their biggest fear was the potential for these synthetic mirror organisms to escape into the environment,
Right.
and they warned about the possibility of lethal infections in humans and animals, even in plants.
Right.
Infections that our current medical arsenal might be completely powerless against.
Okay, that's a pretty terrifying scenario. So are they saying that all research related to mirror life should just be shut down completely?
No, not necessarily. They're specifically calling for a halt to research that's aimed at creating self-replicating mirror organisms.
Like bacteria. But they acknowledge that there could be, valuable applications for mirror molecules that don't have that ability to replicate on their own.
So, like, drawing a line between research on non-replicating molecules, which could have, benefits in research on self-replicating organisms, which they believe carries unacceptable risks.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like saying we can experiment with the individual building blocks,
Right.
but we're not ready to build a whole house that could, potentially collapse on us.
And this idea of control seems to be at the heart of the debate, right? Like, the scientists who are supporting the moratorium are basically saying we don't fully understand how these mirror organisms would interact with the natural world, and
Right.
we can't guarantee containment if something goes wrong.
Exactly. And it's not just about, accidental release. There's also the concern about intentional misuse, right?
Like, what if someone were to, weaponize this technology? The potential consequences are pretty chilling to think about.
It's almost like we're talking about a new kind of arms race, but with synthetic life forms instead of nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
It definitely makes you think twice about the ethics of scientific progress.
Absolutely, and that's why this call for a moratorium is so significant. It's a recognition that we need to pause.
Yeah.
We need to assess the risks,
Right.
and we need to develop a really robust ethical and regulatory framework before we proceed any further with this.
So what's been the response from the wider scientific community? Have other researchers weighed in on this debate?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, this report really sparked a huge global conversation among scientists, among policymakers, even among, the general public.
Yeah.
It's a topic that touches on some very fundamental questions about the nature of life and our responsibility as a species,
Yeah. Have any scientists actually changed their research direction because of these concerns?
Yeah, actually, Dr. Kate Adomala, who was initially involved in mirror cell research,
Okay.
has actually shifted her focus away from creating self-replicating mirror organisms
Okay.
due to these potential risks.
So even some of the scientists who were, initially excited about the potential of this research are now having second thoughts.
Right.
That says a lot about how seriously these concerns are being taken.
Yeah, it really does. And others like Dr. Michael Kay
Yeah.
are doubling down on their calls for caution. He's been very vocal about the need for extreme care
Yeah.
and really rigorous safety protocols in any research involving mirror life.
Yeah, from what we've discussed, it seems like those risks are pretty significant, right?
Yeah.
A runaway population of mirror bacteria or some other mirror organism could, wreak havoc on our ecosystems,
Right.
maybe even threaten, human
Oh,
health
yeah.
directly.
Exactly, but it's also important to acknowledge that not everyone in the scientific community shares the same level of concern.
Right.
Some researchers, like Professor Paul Fremont,
Right.
believe that that the potential benefits of mirror technology outweigh the risks, as long as as long as it's carefully controlled.
So there's a spectrum of opinions, which is, I mean, it's understandable given the complexity of the topic,
Right.
but it sounds like the consensus among those calling for a moratorium is that the potential risks of creating self-replicating mirror organisms are just too great to ignore.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
They're essentially saying let's have a global conversation about this.
Yeah.
Let's establish some really clear ethical guidelines,
Right.
and let's develop, really robust international regulations before we even think about moving forward.
It sounds like those regulations would need to address both, accidental release and intentional misuse.
Yeah. Exactly. We need to be thinking about all the possible scenarios, right? And develop, safeguards to prevent those worst case outcomes. It's a huge responsibility,
Yeah.
and it's one that we can't afford to take lightly.
So this is clearly a debate that's just getting started.
Absolutely. It's a conversation that I think is going to continue to evolve
Right.
as our understanding of mirror life deepens and as the technology itself advances,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The choices that we make today will have, far-reaching consequences for generations to come.
Yeah. It's mind-blowing to think that we might be on the verge of creating a whole new form of life.
Yeah, it really is.
It feels like something out of, science fiction, but
Yeah.
the more we talk about it, the more real it becomes.
Yeah, and that's what makes this such a pivotal moment in history, right? We're not just talking about a scientific breakthrough. We're
Right.
we're talking about a potential paradigm shift
Yeah.
in our understanding of life itself.
It's like a second Genesis, like we were talking about earlier.
Right, and with that power comes a tremendous amount of responsibility, right?
Right. We can't just rush into this blindly.
Exactly. That's why I think this call for moratorium is so crucial. It's a recognition that we need to step back
Yeah.
and have a really serious conversation about the ethical implications of this technology
Mhm.
before we go any further.
So it's not just about the science.
Yeah.
It's about our values as a species.
Exactly. We need to ask ourselves some really tough questions like
Yeah.
what are the potential consequences of creating mirror life?
Hmm.
What are our obligations to future generations?
Right.
And how do we ensure that this technology is used responsibly and ethically?
It's like a giant philosophical thought experiment,
Yeah.
but with real world stakes.
Right.
If we have the ability to create life, does that automatically give us the right to do so?
Yeah. That's a question that philosophers have been, grappling with for centuries.
Yeah.
And now it's becoming a very real dilemma for scientists.
Right. And it's not just a theoretical debate anymore.
Yeah.
With, the advancements in synthetic biology that we've talked about.
Yeah.
This is something that could become a reality in the very near future.
Absolutely. And that's why this discussion needs to happen now.
Yeah.
Before we reach the point of no return.
Yeah.
We need to establish some really clear guidelines and
Yeah.
and regulations for mirror life research, and those regulations need to be international
Right.
in scope.
It makes sense. This isn't something that any one country can handle on its own.
Yeah.
We need a global consensus on how to proceed with
Wow.
this technology.
Exactly. And one of the key recommendations in that 299-page report
Yeah.
is the establishment of a global governing body
Right.
to oversee mirror life research.
Okay.
And they propose a framework that would involve scientists, ethicists, policymakers, representatives from various countries.
Yeah, it seems like a very complex undertaking, but absolutely necessary,
Right.
given the potential global impact of this technology.
It's a daunting task,
Yeah,
but the stakes are just, they're too high to ignore.
right.
We need to ensure that this research is conducted responsibly and with, the utmost caution.
So after this deep dive into mirror life, what's the takeaway for our listener? I mean, it all seems pretty overwhelming.
I think the most important takeaway is that this is a conversation that all of us need to be a part of.
Right.
This isn't just an issue for scientists, it's an issue for all of humanity.
What can our listener do to stay informed and engage with this debate?
Well, there are a lot of great resources available online, including, articles, scientific papers, even podcasts like this one.
Right.
You can also, reach out to your elected officials and let them know that you care about this issue.
Yeah, it's about being aware of the potential risks and benefits of this technology,
Yeah,
and making our voices heard in this global conversation about its future.
exactly. The choices that we make today about mirror life research will have, far-reaching consequences for generations to come.
Right.
It's up to all of us to ensure that those consequences are positive and not, catastrophic.
This has been an incredible deep dive,
Yeah.
and I got to admit, it's left me with more questions than answers, but I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think so too.
It means that we're thinking critically about this issue
Yeah.
and recognizing its complexity. Yeah, absolutely.
This has been a fascinating and really thought-provoking journey into the world of mirror life.
It really has.
We've explored the science, the potential, the risks, the ethical dilemmas that come with this groundbreaking technology.
Yeah, and as we move forward, let's remember that the future of mirror life is not, it's not predetermined.
Oh.
It's a future that we will shape collectively through our choices, through our actions,
Right.
and through our engagement in this really crucial global conversation.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.